6:30 and said to my husband, said she's on her way.
Yeah, I saw that. Here she is.
Hello, stranger.
How do you like that?
You know, it's so funny.
She's
I don't
real.
know if you know, Abby Elkins sold her house. Well, she's closing tomorrow, and I work at a refugee center.
So you consider her a refugee now?
No, but she was giving me all sorts of blankets and heaters.
Nice.
I will take it to the. I every Wednesday I take new refugees through. We help them with, and any Israeli that's been displaced can come to us too.
Nice.
I spoke to a guy who was organizing the Israelis that are coming here, and I said if they need a place to stay, I have a place, but I'm sure all the Israelis reached out. And the Israelis coming here, guess what? Have family here. They're not coming to Chicago by themselves.
Right.
I had a man where I get my hair cut, and the inspector is taking, and I think all the day schools are taking these kids for free. The federation's giving them money. I went to hear this woman who she's south of the border, things you might not know but should know, and she's an American married to an Israeli and came back with her kids because there was no school happening for her kids.
I'm supposed to be in Israel.
I would go in a heartbeat if I didn't have a 9-year-old mother.
See, the only reason I'm not there is because I couldn't get a connecting that worked for me. Because they canceled the
Because
direct
it's all
flight. Yes, you
It's
can only
only
fly
El Al.
in on LA.
Wait a minute, there's no way to get, where's the closest El Al from here?
Probably Newark.
You can't get to Newark?
Oh, I can get there. It's the timing of the flight.
I can't believe there's no flight that gets you. Then go to the day before and stay at the airport hotel.
And what about, you don't want to go Turkish? Just
No.
'cause of-
Turkish won't go. I mean,
Nobody's going to Israel.
nobody will fly into
Do you really
Israel.
think Turkish Airlines flying into Israel?
Yes,
Really?
I think so. On the way out, there
They
were
hate-
people who got out through Turkish.
Here's my deal.
That's
right now,
possible.
so there is. I just got a
Of course,
notice.
it cost me
You know
$700
the
more.
the whole thing. I don't know if you saw, but I watched the UN, the ambassador from Israel to the UN, and they did a program on the Me Too. It was this week on
It was
how
like
the
the
world
day before
says Me
yesterday.
Too, and unless you're a Jew.
Yes, exactly.
And there's going to be a silent protest. Get my glasses out.
I have to change my glasses too.
Oh shoot, where are they? If they're not in here, I'm in trouble.
I'm unavailable.
Hi, Lois and Estelle, by the way.
Hi, Lois and Estelle.
Hi, Lois.
Hello, Linda. Hi, Liz.
Hi,
guys.
everybody. Hi.
Hi.
You.
Look who's talking.
I know. Well, I'm allowed to say I miss everybody.
She's finally here.
I'm just letting everybody know that Israeli Women's Solidarity, if you're interested, they're going to have a silent walk in condemnation of the absence of condemnation of the brutal rapings of countless women, children, and men at Old Orchard on Thursday, December 14th.
Close enough for me.
And what they're doing is at the starting point, and they're saying, don't tell your friends, but don't advertise it on social media because this is just a silent march. They don't want a Palestinian uprising.
Yeah.
so to
Yeah.
speak.
What time, Linda? Do they say a time?
Yes, 10:45, but that means you'd miss this class.
That's all right.
11 a.m. walk.
It's all right.
I'm going to go. And I'll send, what I'm going to do is forward you the email I got.
Good.
And then
And
if
where you said a march, so where are they marching from?
you don't have the information, I'm going to find out. That's a good question. It
Because
says a
depending
silent,
on how far they're marching, I can come. I can't.
I don't
go, walk
I have
to,
no information.
okay.
I know that it's done with the Wiesenthal Center, Simon Wiesenthal Foundation, and Israel. I think it's a real grassroots, and they want you to make your own signs. I'll send you all the stuff, and if you decide you go, I'll be happy to meet you guys, like at a specific place. This is saying their starting point is the north parking lot by Old Orchard, by the old Bloomingdale's, not Bloomies.
Mhm.
I know exactly where they meet. Right, like after you get off the highway, I'm assuming that north parking lot. On, the Old Orchard Road. before
We
you get to-
we were almost right at that spot last night, so we know.
We could
Right,
find.
Liz? Right, Liz?
What was there last night?
We were at Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, yes, exactly, around the corner. But I'd be happy to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that
Send us the email.
want people to be, want it to be very good. They want you to like tie your hands, and I'm not that theatrical. I'll be happy to make a sign and walk with it. Then I was thinking, how do you walk with a sign if your hands are tied?
Yeah.
They weren't thinking that.
Okay, I am grateful to have the gang. The gang's all here. Hail, hail, the gang's all here. Not everybody in person yet, but we're all together.
Oh, I can find this.
And so we last time we did this reading of this story, which I was suggesting doesn't get the treatment it deserves, because it's really one of the rich stories of the Torah. There's so much going on. And it seems to be the beginning of, maybe not, it seems to maybe be a series of events that are going to lead to what eventually is the straw that breaks the camel's back, which is going to be the story of the spies that's coming up later. But this story really has so much in it. A lot of pathos, a lot of interesting notions, the kind of spoken issues that deserve attention, and some unspoken ones that deserve attention. One of them was why is this so troubling to Moshe? There's been other complaints that have happened, but for some reason this one just seems, mostly we're getting it from his reaction. The enormity of what's going on here is mostly apparent in his reaction to it, not so much in the description of it. They're complaining that they want meat. There was some other complaining beforehand. There were two groups. We're in chapter 11, in Bamidbar chapter 11. So we have two moments that are captured here. One very briefly and cryptically was right away, and it refers to a group called the Mitonanim, the complainers. But then, and there, Moshe prays to God. A fire had gone out, whatever that means. A fire had gone out at what they call the edges of the camp. And then Moshe, the people cry out to Moshe. Moshe davens on their behalf, and it stops. And that place is called Taveira because of the fire. There was some kind of fire that consumed people on the edges of the camp. And then there's another group called the Asaf Suf. Maybe they're another group, maybe they're the same group. The Asaf Suf wanted, they had lust for meat. They wanted meat. And they complain, and Moshe just can't take it.
I like that word, subsume.
Yeah, it's a very interesting word. Right, they're using that translation, by the way. That's a thoughtful translation, because we're going to see that this word asaf suf, the word itself is like a double verb. It's built on a double verb, or maybe a noun. It's a noun. We'll see if it's it's built on a verb or it's just a noun that has a repeating.
But
Like,
what's the word gluttonous that they use? What's the Hebrew word? In four, I'm reading it for the riffraff and the misspelled gluttonous being.
that's taiva, that's lust, what we'll call lust or
And
desire.
what word is that?
Ta'ava.
Ta'ava.
So that is a 1, 2, 3, 4. Hit'avu ta'ava.
Yeah,
So there's the verb and the noun.
so you're saying, yes, I see.
Tava really means just like a desire, a strong desire, or like a lust. And in this case for meat. So the word, so there is, or let's just look at this. This is a academic article. Okay, this is by Dr. Rabbi David J. Zucker. The site is called thetorah.com. When the Israelites left Egypt, they were accompanied by an Erev Rav. That's what it says in Exodus 12:38. Erev Rav. This is a term that has been variously translated, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you look in the commentaries, many of them say that Asaf Suf is the Erev Rav, and so are the Mit Onanim from before that they are coming from this group called the Erev Rav. What is the Erev Rav?
What?
Erev Rav. Ayin Resh Vet. Second word, Resh Vet. Erev Rav. This is referred to in Exodus 12:38. Do you have Exodus 12:38 over there?
I look at it.
You have Exodus
I
12:38.
can get,
All right.
12:38,
Yeah.
right over here. It says, Regam Erev Rav, aha. Allah, Tam.
So the Erev Rav also went up with them. So that's how they translate it, right? You're both translating it as mixed multitude. So it says, and a mixed multitude went up with them. That sounds like these are not Jews, right? These are not Jews. The Bnei Israel go up, and also an Erev Rav went up with them.
That is an interesting word, because Rav, you think of as, right, Rabbi Rav?
No, but a Rav can be many. Like in last week's Torah portion, Asaph says, Yeshli Rav, I have many, I have a much,
Many.
like Harbe, like the word Harbe. So, all right, so now, when the Israelites left Egypt, they were accompanied by an Erev Rav. This obscure term has been interpreted in different ways throughout 2 millennia of Bible interpretation, both positively and negatively. And modern scholars still debate its exact meaning. The term survives in modern Jewish discourse as a slur against other Jews. So he's saying that sometimes other Jews will use this term. This term would mean like an enemy within, from within. In other words, this is a group of people who identify with idolatry, or they identify with whatever is not of the, not part of the Jewish mission. And they cause like havoc from within. So this is how it's used as a slur. Somebody would say, oh, they're from the Erev Rav. When you identify somebody as the Erev Rav, you're identifying them as a kind of enemy from within. Or
almost sounds like riffraff.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Erev Rav, that's why he's using that translation.
Right.
Also, Asaf Suf.
It's a good word.
Asaf Suf. Asaf Suf has that repetition.
It doesn't.
Erev Rav has that interpretation.
Is it the same interpretation for both words?
That's what he's going to say. There are some scholars who say that. That's why we're looking at this. He's going to, and the choice of translation, instead of translating it, because if you translate as riffraff, then you bring over the poetic Asaf Suf or Erev Rav. The repetition comes in. So that choice of riffraff.
Mixed multitude and riffraff.
Right. So keeping riffraff
I like
in it
that.
is keeping the poetry, which
Right.
is that was certainly a very thoughtful. They knew it when they're doing it at the time. He went home and he told his wife, "You're not going to believe this
Oh,
one. Today was a good one. Today was a good one."
It says here, riffraff. This translation conveys the wordplay in the
There you go.
sound of Hebrew.
There you
Asaf Suf.
There you
The
go.
term refers to non-Israelites who joined the Israelites break for freedom. Erev Ra.
There we go. So now, when he went home, he's saying to his wife, "Today was a good one. I had to work," because most translations aren't that interesting, but then he gets a good one. Okay. All right. So let's look here at the body of the article. The meaning of the term Erev Rav. Erev, Ayin Resh Vet. All right. So some of this is technical, okay, because these are linguists. Right.
That's the beauty of Hebrew.
Yep. Starting with the first word, Ayin Resh Vet. Shaul Bar, professor of Bible at University of Memphis, notes that in a number of biblical contexts, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, the term Erev seems to refer to soldiers. Similarly, Israel Cole, professor emeritus of Bible at Hebrew University, suggests that it may be a cognate of the Akkadian urbi, which refers to a type of soldier. Whether or not Bar and Cole are correct here, this is certainly not how the term has been interpreted traditionally, because this would mean whenever it talks about Erev Rav, you would translate it as soldier. So they went up and they had lots of soldiers with them. This would mean they're not referring to a foreign element that has attached itself to the Jewish people. It's just identifying that there were soldiers amongst the people that were going up. But he makes the point that although these two scholars suggest it might be referring to soldier, it's not. He says this is not the traditional interpretation. Instead, the common understanding assumes that Erev derives from the root meaning to mix, like an irbu, like an Erev. That's why Erev. Why is Erev called Erev? Because Erev is like a mixture of the day and the night. You have the day, clear day. You have dark, and then there's like a moment of mixture where so Vayhi Erev, there was Erev, and Boker. Erev and Boker would be when you start to be able to see the difference between things, Levaker, or you can sort of see the difference between things. Erev would be when it's getting mixed. So the evening, so dawn and dusk. Dawn could be called Erev, dusk could be called Boker, and that's where maybe the term Erev comes from a mixture. It's like a kind of mixture. So,
Like it says a mixed multitude.
right, because Rav, the word Rav, but we didn't get to Rav yet.
It's
That's
multitude, but you're
right.
saying mix, like it's
right. They're taking that term. He's calling that the traditional one. This seems to be what most people assume. He's acknowledging that there is a potential other meaning, which means soldier, but that's not the traditional understanding. The traditional understanding means it's some kind of mixture. There's some kind of mixed people. Rav, the second word Rav, is an adjective meaning great or many, and thus the standard translation of the term Erev Rav is mixed multitude. William Propp notes that Exodus 12:38 gives no indication of how numerous the Erev Rav was conceived to be. Nevertheless, the Midrash, as it's wont, takes this very far. Thus, the Mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael, which is a particular Midrash, glosses the term Erev Rav to mean, Rabbi Yishmael says 1,200,000 people. Rabbi Kiva says 2,400,000 people. Rabbi Nathan says 3,600,000 people. Again, this is Midrash, not meant to be taken literally. Targum Pseudo Jonathan has a similar idea, translating Sagi'in Minhon Masan Barboy Ribo. There were more than 1,400,000. The number he chooses makes the Erev Rav more numerous than the Israelites, whose number the Torah gives us 600,000 men. All right. And yet many scholars are skeptical that the word Rav here means many. The term has reduplicative quality, with the letters Resh and Bet being repeated, Erev Rav. So it's like a repetition. Thus, Umberto Cassuto writes in his commentary on Exodus. He's often quoted, by the way. He was I think he was a professor at Hebrew U at the end of his career. But Nechama Leibovitz quotes him a lot. A lot of Bible scholars end up quoting him, Umberto Cassuto. Apparently, the correct view is that which regards the expression Erev Rab as a single word from the stem Ayin Resh Bet, formed by the repetition of the two last radicals. So it's not two separate words. It's not Erev Rab. This, by the way, the month of Cheshvan, which was the previous month to this month, in truth, it's not the month of Cheshvan. It's the month of Mar Cheshvan. Mar Cheshvan is one word. Mar Cheshvan. What happened was, at some point, there was a word play that the rabbi started to use, and they said that Cheshvan is a bitter month because it doesn't have holidays. But it's just a word play. The actual name of the month is Mar Cheshvan. It's not two words, it's one word. And he's suggesting, Cassuto is suggesting, that originally that was the case with Erev Rav. Erev Rav is like Asaf Suf. It was one word that has this kind of repeated syllable. A single word from the stem Erev, formed by the repetition of the last two radicals. In fact, in the Samaritan Pentateuch, the term is written as one word. Now, the Samaritans have a Torah. They have the Torah. They have the Torah, and I think the book of Joshua, as their own. And they've had it as their own for a long time, possibly more than 2,000 years, possibly 2,500 years. They've had it. And so obviously there are some differences in it. And this is one of them. Instead of Erev Rav being written as two words, they have it written as one word. If this is the origin of the term, then the Torah is making no comment at all on the size of the group. Rav here doesn't mean great. Erev Rav is just, the Rav part is not a separate word. It's like Mar is not a separate word. It doesn't mean bitter. Mar Cheshvan is just the name of the month. It doesn't mean bitter Cheshvan. It's the name of the month. It's a word play to say. And it's so the same thing with Erev Rav. It's not two separate words. Rav doesn't mean many. It's not.
But it's in the Torah written as two
So the thing is, they would argue that it got split at some point into two words. Originally, it was supposed to be
How
one
do
word.
they know that?
Because they don't know it for sure, except that in the Samaritan Pentateuch, it's written as one word. And also, you have Asaf Suf as an example, where they're doing it about the similar kind of people. They're doing that with it.
It's one word.
Right. This is not proof. This is a suggestion. With linguists,
Right.
you often don't get proof. You get suggestions. Anyways, it's possible that Rav is not telling you there were a lot of them. It's just part of the word. All right. Reading Erev Rav as reduplicative strengthens the traditional argument that this group is the same one that's referenced in Numbers 11, our case. The Asaf Suf in their midst felt a gluttonous craving. And then the Israelites wept and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt. The story tells of how the Israelites, spurred on by an
Fish is not meat.
I know, we last week we were talking about that issue. There are certain things that they call meat,
Right.
that like they called the birds meat, right? So in some context,
I would say birds are more meat. Well, I guess fish
you
is
could
the
say,
same.
you could characterize it as flesh. It's
You
the
could
flesh
say
of
the
the
same
fish,
about the fish.
right? But there's certain times, like last week we were talking about it, and I think even a couple weeks before, that you could do this Venn diagram where you could have land mammals like cows and goats and sheep, etc. So you have that class, And then you have wild animals, which could be similar. So you could have, let's say, bison. You could have
They're
bison,
domesticated now.
right? But bison are still considered a wild animal. They
Really?
have domesticated deer too. They have domesticated
Reindeer.
all sorts. Even regular deer. You could get,
Really?
when you get deer on a menu, it's often,
Venison?
yeah.
I mean,
When you
it's
get venison,
kosher, right?
yes. And when you get it, it's coming from a farm.
Right.
It's not a guy who
It's
went out.
not somebody
hunting.
went in my backyard and shot a deer.
Nobody did, right?
No.
Right, but let's say, and it's
Maybe.
right, and domesticating it would be one of the only ways you could really. Otherwise, I mean, you could catch it with a net, I guess. Anyways, so you have that grouping. There's different laws between those. For instance, there are certain fats that are forbidden in the domesticated, in the cow, that are not forbidden in the bison. There are certain rules that with the bison, when you shecht it, there's a special mitzvah to cover the blood with earth. With the cow, there's not that separate mitzvah.
Really?
Then there's
Interesting.
birds. Birds still require shechita. Birds require shechita, but they're not forbidden to eat with milk biblically, because there is
But
no.
wait a second. Is a chicken considered a bird?
Yeah.
But you can't, people now, rabbinical.
It's rabbinic,
Yeah.
right? But how do I? What's the hint that it's not? How do I know it's not forbidden in the Torah? Because in the Torah it says you should not
Suckle your.
a kid in its mother's milk. There is no mother's milk by a bird. So biblically, yeah, this is most opinions. This is what we assume, that biblically they don't have that issue. They do have the issue of covering the blood, which is similar to chaya, but it's different from. And all right, so now, and also it seems like during the time they were in the desert, they could not eat cattle or sheep or goats unless they were part of a sacrifice. But apparently they could eat birds. So birds are meat for some things, birds are not meat for other things. They are asking for meat, and God says, you want meat? I'll give you meat. And he brings them birds, he brings them quail. So for some things, birds are considered meat, and they are in the same category of some animals. They need shechita, they need the blood covering, but they're not forbidden with them. So you could see how these Venn diagrams would come up. And then you have fish.
Well,
Now,
where are they getting fish in the desert?
So it's not when you think of a desert, you're thinking of like the Arabian desert. These are wilderness. Wilderness has access to rivers and things like that. It also, in wilderness, has access to people who have caravans and could be coming with salted fish or other kinds of things. So even Moshe over here says, where would I find it? Let's say fish. He's open to the idea of fish, but he said, where would I get enough fish for these people? There's too many people for the fish. So they're open to the idea that fish is meat here. By the way, fish, we saw in Noah, in the transition where they're now permitted to eat animals and things after the flood. It says there, birds and fish. Up until then, they could not eat. Technically, mankind was not supposed to eat birds, fish, or meat, or what we would call animals. So in certain ways, fish is in a category of birds and animals. In certain times, it's not. It doesn't need shechita, for instance. So anyways, okay. Now, back to this. So they said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt. The story tells of how the Israelites, spurred on by an obscure group called the Asaf Suf, complain about the lack of meat, which leads to God bringing quail and eventually to the deaths of many of the complainants. The term Asaf Suf is reduplicative, as they were suggesting about Erev Rav. If you read Erev Rav as one word, then Erev Rav is what they call reduplicative. The last two letters in this case are just like an echo of the previous. Now it's almost like an echo.
Like saf soup.
Yes,
Same two.
that's what he's saying. The term asaf suf is reduplicative. It comes from the word aleph samach pei, meaning to gather. The impulse to equate asaf suf with Erev Rav is easy to understand, as these are the only references in the Torah to a group of outsiders accompanying the Israelites in the wilderness.
To what?
What?
Would you say asaf soup comes from aleph samach
Fei. That's it. Alotdafna, which means to gather, or those who gather. Yosef, the name Yosef comes from that. Even in modern Hebrew, they refer to an asifah, is like a gathering.
Oh, yeah,
If
like
you-
an asifa, right. We used to have those at, like, a meeting.
Yeah, that's a meeting. It's a gathering. Asifah, it's the same
What-
word.
Leaf gauche is to meet.
Right, that's to bump into or to meet. That's like where you're, but if there's a gathering of people, that you would call an asifah.
So Yosef, never thought of that.
In fact, even the term Erev Rav is ridiculous. This does not prove that the two groups are one and the same, though it is suggested. Again, it's just pointing to it, but you could see why the commentaries jumped to this, and it's very common to associate the two, and you could see why. First of all, it seems to be some kind of group identified separately, and it has this reduplicative quality. The identification of the two groups with each other goes back to the Second Temple period, since the Greek LXX translation renders both. LXX is Septuagint. This is how, I don't know why he's doing that. Why doesn't he say Septuagint? Septuagint means 70.
Yeah.
So LXX is
Well, I got
70.
the 70.
Right, that's it. Anyways, the Septuagint, since the Greek Septuagint translation renders both Erev and Asaf Suf with the terms epimiktos, mixed crowd. Similarly, traditional commentators such as Midrash Tanhuma, the Buber edition, and Midrash Agada, the Buber edition, and Numbers Rabbah and Avram Ibn Ezra all connect the two groups. So you have two collections of Midrash, plus actually three collections of Midrash, and Rabbi Avram Ibn Ezra, all connecting the Asaf Suf with the Erev Rav. All of these traditional commentaries, as well as LXX, the Septuagint, follow the MT, which I'm assuming is Midrash Tanhuma. If you have collections of Midrash, let's say you decided you wanted to have a Midrash collection. So there's one work that covers the 5 books of the Torah, plus a couple of the other works like the Megillot, I think, and maybe, I don't know if it like Shirash, yeah, the Megillot, I think. I don't know if it might have a few more. That's called Midrash Rabbah, Rabbah's Midrash. What happened was at the time of the Talmud, sometime after the Mishnah is put together, they started gathering teachings like on everything. So there actually are a lot of Midrash-like things in the Talmud. But they made it into the Talmud. The stuff that didn't make it into the Talmud is collected by different collectors. Midrash Rabbah is one of them. Now, I don't know about all of it. I don't know what scholars say about all of it, because I think the Midrash Rabbah on Exodus only appears later than the other ones. I don't know if they agree that there was a person named Rabbah. There is a important Talmudic figure called Rabbah, who I don't know what they say about whether he is actually the figure that collected. Anyways, that's your most, if you're going to get one set of Midrash, that's the one you're most likely to have. It's the one most quoted. Number 2 on your list is Midrash Tanhuma. It's 1 volume, much smaller, 1 volume. And then you have all sorts of other Midrash collections. There are halachic Midrash and other kinds of Midrash that you could have as collections. There's even something called Yalkut Shimoni, which is a collection of Midrash that's later. And there's something called Yalkut Me'am Loes, which is much later. It was written like in the 1600s, which seems to be built on Midrashim, but it's often treated like Midrash. But anyway, so in this list here, he's got Midrash Rabbah and he's got Midrash Tanhuma. These are really essential Midrash sources. So if you're quoting something from these sources, they are it would be a highly vetted midrashic source, let's just say that. But we also know that midrash is often not literal. It's often poetry. It's often, or conundrums, written like riddles. It's like, so you have to sort of be careful about it. Yeah, because they could very easily do a poetic reading of it that's not linguistic.
I'm sure there's one.
Right.
My new favorite word.
What?
My new favorite word.
Yeah,
Asaf
that's absolute. That's a good one. All of these traditional commentators follow the MT in understanding the word Rav as a separate term, meaning many. In the 19th century, however, Shadal, Shmuel David Luzzatto, noted the reduplicative reading to clinch the connection between Erev Rav and Asaf Suf. And he writes, the Aramaic translation of Asaf Suf is Arav Ravim. So too the Samaritan Pentateuch reads, and the Erev Rav also came up in one word. According to this, it is a reduplicative term and is literally like the word Asaf Suf. So they're just two versions of the same thing. And therefore, Rav doesn't mean multitude. Again, these are linguists who are saying that this word, Erev Rav, really is meant to be seen as one word, and Rav is not supposed to be translated as many. Rav is just, it's like Mar Cheshvan.
But it
Mar
is a,
Cheshvan
Rav
is
is
not,
a word. They used to remember the radio, they'd go Shalom Rav.
right, but it is, but that's why you might,
Multitudes.
right, but Mar is also a word, means
Right,
bitter.
Right.
But if they're saying, but the original word had nothing to do with bitter, it was just Mar Cheshvan. It was built into the word. It's named after something or some, who knows what, but it's not, but then there was a word play after a while. You could see why.
Right.
You could see why people would do that
Right.
word play,
Well, they
bitter
had-
Cheshvan. But then many people started to think of the month just as the month of Cheshvan. It
Right.
never was just the month. All right. William Foxwell Albright, or William Albright for short, considered to be the greatest American biblical scholar and archaeologist. I think he was the one who said how out of God to choose the Jews. Is he? Was it William Albright? I'd have to look this up now. Sorry.
I'll look it up.
Look up how out of God to choose the Jews.
I'm gonna look it up.
All right,
So
good. Thank
can
you.
continue on.
All right. So William
It's not
Albright,
so odd the Jews chose God.
that's the later return to him, but he didn't. He only had the first part. Whoever it was, for some reason, I think it's William Albright. Considered to be the greatest Baba and archaeologist, the first part of 27 makes the point clearly. In one passage, they are called RBRB, in another SPSP, disregarding the somewhat questionable transmitter.
William Norman Ewer.
Who is it?
William Norman Ewer.
Oh, totally
Just
different
the
guy.
British journalist and communist. But not so odd as those who chose a Jewish God but spurns the Jews.
Oh, that's his line?
Yeah.
So mine is slightly different. How odd of God to choose the
No,
Jews.
it's here.
Oh,
How
he
odd of
started that
God to choose the
Oh, I
Jews.
see. And he goes on to
Thus,
say,
the British journalist and communist William Norman Ewer in the early part of the last century. The reply came from Cecil Brown,
oh,
but not so odd as those who choose a Jewish God but spurn the Jews.
that's the Christians. So that was
That's
another,
the world.
right. So
Right,
that
the
was,
Christian world.
that's actually, I never heard that.
Isn't that a good one?
Yeah.
I mean,
The one I heard is the one Lois quoted.
Yeah.
It's not so odd the
It's
the
from
Jews
the-
chose God, but I like that.
Wall Street Journal.
Could you just
Yeah.
forward that to me?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I like that.
Hopefully.
All right. So it's not William Albright. That's about him. All right. So anyways, in one passage, they are called RBRB, in another SPSP, disregarding the somewhat questionable transmitted vocalization. Both terms are reduplicated collectives derived from verbs meaning respectively to change, mix,
It's
and
from
to
the Wall
gather.
Street Journal. I don't have a subscription.
Oh,
See if I can find it somewhere else.
that's
What
all
was
right.
my-
That's all right. All right, I'll just look it
I
up.
have it here.
Okay. This interpretation has also been adopted by the HALOT dictionary. I don't know what that is, but I don't think it has anything to do with challah. All right, riffraff. Robert Alter, although translating motley throng in the
You
main
can do it.
text, motley throng, and thus ignoring the sound effect of the doubling, accepts the reduplicative interpretations in his gloss, explaining that such reduplication is a Hebrew form for pejoratives. He further notes in parenthesis that the English riffraff comes close, and that's probably why they chose riffraff in your edition there, in the Eitz Chaim. Everett Fox also uses the word riffraff in his commentary.
How's it translated in yours, asafsu?
Well,
11:4. I'm just curious.
rabble, that was among them, cultivated a craving.
Rabble.
Yeah,
What? The
Rabble,
rabble.
The rabble.
right.
Oh,
But
riffraff's a better word.
I agree.
So much
So
better.
they're saying
I
that
agree.
Robert Alter suggests it in his notes, but he doesn't actually use it. Everett Fox uses it, and he's using it in the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, the Shotgun Bible. Okay,
I have to read you something funny.
yeah,
So you said how odd of God to choose the Jews,
right.
and it said it provoked at least 3 capping replies. Not odd of God, goyim annoy him.
Oh, that's a good one. I also never heard of that one. Could you send me that
Yeah,
list?
I did.
Okay, that's a good one. All right, which works for both Erev Rav, Arav Rav, and Asaf Suf, and ties them all together.
Oh my God.
Whether the Erev Rav is riffraff or mixed multitude, it seems clear that they are non-Israelites. But who are they specifically, and why do they join the Israelites leaving Egypt? One possibility is that they are meant to be a group of Egyptians and or other ethnic groups who were living among the Israelites and decided to leave with them. All right, so that's one. They just happen to be already living amongst the Jews, and when the Jews take off, they decide to go with the Jews. Number 2, mercenaries. Those who see the Erev Rav as a mercenary force, such as Bar and Kol, reference above, because they say the word's connected to soldiers, interpret them as a military alliance. This, however, is a modern solution not reflected in traditional commentaries. Rashi interprets them as local Egyptians and other foreigners who align themselves with the Israelites for ideological reasons. In other words, they are, in a sense, converts. They may not actually convert, but they are aligning themselves with the Jewish people for ideological reasons. In a similar vein, 10th and 11th century Midrash, Exodus Rabbah. See, they say Exodus Rabbah is 10th and 11th century Midrash. They don't identify Exodus Rabbah with the other part of Midrash Rabbah for some reason. I have a feeling it's because it was only emerged at that time, which makes sense. So they call it 10th and 11th century Midrash Exodus Rabbah, envisions a split among the Egyptians between those who joined the Israelites and those who faced the wrath of God. In other words, there really was an option. There was an option to go with the Jews if you were an Egyptian. William Propp, who translates Erev Rav as many foreigners, offers a variation on this approach, suggesting that these might be foreigners living amongst Israel as temporary or long-term sojourners. Propp is making use of the same category as Rashi, Gerim, though in the biblical sense of resident aliens and not the rabbinic converts. So that's when you use the word ger. So there's 2 types of ger. There's what we would call a resident alien, where they're not converting. They're just living amongst the Jewish people, but have been sort of granted residence.
Following
So
along.
they may only follow what we call the Noahide laws. So they don't necessarily keep Shabbos, and they don't have to. They don't keep Pesach, and they don't have to because they're not Jewish. But they have to. They can't worship idols. There's certain things, and there is a question: do they have to keep the entire Noahide laws? Is it just about idolatry? But let's assume, at minimally, they're not following idols. They might be called. they might be like what we call today B'nai Noach. There was a group of people that are Gentile. Almost all of these people used to be Christians, and they've given up their Christian doctrine, but they still are not converted to Judaism. They're living as Noachites. So these people could be granted residency in Israel, and they would also be called a ger. They would be called a ger, but there, ger means alien resident. Ger toshav, an alien resident. And then there's a term ger, where somebody's actually converted to be part of the Jewish nation. So oftentimes they're called a ger tzedek, a righteous convert. So when you're distinguishing between the two.
Why use the word ger at all?
Because that's what they use the word in the Torah. Gerim hayisam, you were
Once a
gerim.
Jew, always a Jew. Why do you have to distinguish that they're a convert or?
You mean after they convert?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, for the sake of the adjustment of the person, there's a tremendous amount of work that they still are going to be engaged in after they technically convert. And a benevolent person, knowing that they're a convert, is going to help them adjust, because the fact that you spent 2 years or 3 years, whatever it was, studying, and then suddenly you're Jewish, when there's an assumption of all this kind of internal knowledge that we've collected over since we were little kids, and all sorts of elements of belonging that won't be obvious to a person who already belongs, that are not explained. So a benevolent other person would use that information to help the person adjust, because that adjustment's going to take years, even after conversion. There are some rules about converts. One is they can't marry a Cohen.
Right.
A woman can't marry a Cohen. There are some other rules about converts. For instance, a convert can't become a king of the Jewish people. So there are some technical rules that in most cases for most people are not applicable, but there are some. But I think in the hands of a compassionate person, it would be useful information so that you could step in when you recognize that another person may not be getting what's going on. But I studied with some people. The reason this was going back 20 years ago, there was a couple. I was still living in West Drivers Park, so it was longer than 20 years ago. And this couple were recent converts. And a rabbi who I knew asked me if I would study with them. So I was studying with them. And I happened to mention to somebody else that I was studying with this couple who were converts. And they heard that I told somebody else that they were converts, and they stopped learning with me, and they won't talk to me. They wouldn't talk to me because they felt I divulged personal information that they didn't want divulged to other people. They didn't want other people to know they're converts. And I had never entertained the possibility that that would be the case. But after that, I do. And so now I understand that there are some people who want people to know, and there's some people who don't want people to know.
It's
and
sensitive, I guess.
it's very sensitive, yeah. I often learn from making a mistake. Other people anticipate these things.
Yeah.
Other people anticipate it. Okay. All right. So according to Prop, he thinks of them as foreigners. They're not necessarily. They may, according to him, they're more like resident aliens. According to Rashi, they are aligning themselves with the faith. They're aligning themselves with the faith. In either case, the term ger could apply, because ger could apply to a resident alien. Ger could also apply to somebody who's adopting the faith. In contrast to this interpretation, the former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Joseph Hertz, in his classic commentary, The Pentateuch and Haftorahs, writes, a mass of non-Israelite strangers. That is his translation, including slaves and prisoners of war who took advantage of the panic to escape from Egypt. They were not a desirable class of associates, as appears in Numbers 11, 4 and 5, our story. So in our story, we are seeing that this class has not bought in to the attitude that the Jewish people are supposed to be having. Maybe the rest of the Jewish nation is okay without having meat for a long time and just having mun, but they're sick and tired of it, and they want meat. So, but somehow that's going to spread. Obviously, it may start with them, but it's, I guess, going to spread. The contemporary philosopher Kenneth Seeskin expresses a similar sentiment about the Erev Rav, writing that slaves, political prisoners, thieves, and anyone else who might benefit from the social chaos accompanied the Israelites in the Exodus. An alternative possibility is that the term reflects not a group of people that joined the Israelites at the time of the Exodus, but people who had already become part of the Israelites through intermarriage. As the Bible envisions Israelites living amongst Egyptians for decades or even centuries, depending on one source, it's not hard to imagine they're marrying locals, whether Egyptians or other foreigners. Thus, Shadal, Shlomo David Luria, writes, now we find in Nehemiah, they separated all the alien admixture, Erev. So Nehemiah uses the word Erev from Israel. The intention there is to intermarriage. So he's using the term for intermarriage. Therefore, it seems to me that Erev Rav was mixed with them from earlier times, and that they are Egyptian men who married Israelite women and Egyptian women who married Israelite men. This reading was adopted by Beno Jacob and is also found in the New American Bible translation, which includes the note mixed ancestry, half Hebrew, half Egyptian, and calls attention to the story of the blaspheming son of Shlomit bat Dibri and the Egyptian man. So far, we have all those options. One option is mercenaries. Another option is some version of peoples that were already hanging out with the Jews. Another one is people that just, like slaves and thieves and other people that just saw it as an opportunity to get out.
Yeah.
Another option is that we're talking about converts. Another option is we're talking about resident aliens. Another option is that we're talking about mixed marriage, that we're talking about intermarriages, the spouses from intermarriages that would have gone on. That's the Shadal. You did. You walked out during a key one.
Nature calls.
That's it. So that is from the book of Nehemiah. In the book of Nehemiah, there is the word Erev from Israel.
What about Eruv? Is it the same?
Eruv is there is referring to the food that is mixed together or gathered together. That's how many people understand what it's referring. So that would also be mixed or gathered. It could be gathered, food that's gathered together. But anyways, in Nehemiah, it said that it's talking about intermarriage. And so Shlomo David Luria suggested that might be what the Erev Rav are, that these are people that came in through intermarriage. And Beno Jacob also likes that, and he translates it as mixed ancestry, half Hebrew, half Egyptian. All right, the 13th century mystical work, the Zohar, which blames many evils on the intermixing of Israelites with the Erev Rav, argues that the term cannot refer to a mass of peoples who joined the Israelites, but instead refers to a specific shift of Egyptian magicians who worked from midday to early afternoon, which is called the Great Evening. That brought in Erev as evening. These magicians have a change of heart. They tried at first to stand against the Holy One's wonders. Once they saw the miracles and wonders that Moshe performed in Egypt, they turned to join Moses. The Holy One said to Moses, "Don't accept them." Moshe said, "Master of the world, now that they have seen your power, they wish to convert. They will see your power manifest daily, and they will know that there is no God but you." And Moses accepted them. In the end, when Moses is late coming down the mountain, God is proven right, since this is the group that sees that Moses is late in coming down the mountain and forces Aaron to build a golden calf. So that is the Zohar. In explaining the Zohar passage, Gerald Aronoff writes that these Egyptians never truly joined the Israelites, and further, that they were a source of trouble during the years of wandering in the wilderness. He explains that the message of the Zohar is that not all evil can be turned into good. Some people are just not going to change. Despite the existence of some positive evaluations, the tendency to view the Erev Rav with a jaundiced eye can already be seen in the rabbinic period. Thus, the Babylonian Talmud recounts, Rav Nosson bar Abba said in the name of Rav. Rav would be first generation Amora in Bavel around the year 220, 250. The wealthy Jews of Babylonia will be going to Gehenna. When Shabtai bar Marinus came to Bavel, he looked for work but couldn't find any. He looked for food, but no one fed him. He said regarding them, they must be descendants of the Erev Rav, for it says, and show you compassion to make you compassionate. Anyone who has compassion on people, it is known that he's a descendant of the father of Abraham. And anyone who does not have compassion on people, it is known that he is not a descendant of our father of Abraham. So if you see somebody who claims to be Jewish, but doesn't have a compassionate drop in his body, he may claim to be Jewish, but you know he must come from the Erev Rav, because no Jew could not show compassion. In the middle to late 18th century, during the controversy over the messianic claims of Jacob Frank, Shabtai Tzvi is the most famous of the false messiahs, but Jacob Frank, I think in literature, he probably takes number 2 in the famous false messiahs of that period of a few hundred years. The Frankists denounced their opponents as descendants of the Erev Rav. Those who regarded the Frankist movement as apostasy labeled its descendants of the very group. So each one was calling the other one an Erev Rav. In other words, you are not truly Jewish.
And
I would, yeah, go ahead.
and a substitute is the same.
Right.
So
That's
I
what they're
can't
saying.
call my kids and say, you rabble rousers, you are substitute.
I wouldn't add the
Not a good
Asap
one.
Suf. You could do the rabble rousers though, and you could do the riff raff if you want to.
Refract.
Now I would just like to reiterate my personal commitment since before October 7th. We talked about it in our class after the Yom Kippur, horrendous Yom Kippur events beforehand, where Jew was against Jew. And I made a commitment which I'm sticking to, which is there is no them, there is only us. And that includes this. There is no, you can't look at certain Jews and say that they are somehow different and therefore they shouldn't be counted amongst us. We need everybody, every Jew, 100%. Even those ones that we
even the riffraff.
Even what you would identify as the riffraff. They are not.
That would be me.
Here, they're using it as an excuse to say this person isn't really Jewish. It's like somebody uses the excuse they're not.
People.
There's people who do use the same thing. They're not really human. If they're not really human, I'm allowed to kill them.
There's lots of people that do use that.
I know.
Or they, like, when they see somebody like me, they go, well, I'm a Torah Jew. I'm like, oh,
right.
What am I?
Right. If somebody,
because I'm not, must speak Dati.
Right. So if anybody who's doing that has the intent to somehow say they're less than human and therefore I'm allowed to treat them like trash. And so as a tonic, as a healing, as a balm for that, I personally, not saying what anybody else has to, I am personally committed to the idea. There is no them, only us. All right. In the middle 18th century, so he's saying the Frankists called the other people Erev Rav, the other people called them Erev Rav. Here we see the sobriquet Erev Rav become a weapon or slur that some Jews used to delegitimize other Jews with different views or to accuse them of being disloyal. The same usage of the term as a slur continues in our day. In modern Jewish and especially Israeli parlance, Erev Rav is translated as riffraff or rabble, sometimes even traitors. Describing the late 20th century actions of Rabbi Uzi Meshulam Moti Ibari of the University, let's pause for a second. So, describing the late 20th century actions of Rabbi Uzi Meshulam, comma, Moti and Bari of the University of North Carolina notes, Meshulam identified the Israeli left with the Erev Rav, thus demonizing it. Representing the other end of the political or religious spectrum, a group of Jews for racial and economic justice in 2016 published an online Haggadah titled Mixed Multitudes, Nobody's Free Till Everybody's Free, a racial justice Haggadah for Pesach. There, the phrase mixed multitude is understood in a positive sense. Early in the Haggadah, it states, we are the mixed multitude, and we've always been a mixed multitude. That's their Haggadah, not in the regular. If you're looking for that in the average Haggadah, you will not find that. There, perhaps the most famous example of such a slur occurred when the sister term Asaf Suf, that's ours, in 1999, during the Israeli election campaign with Ehud Barak of Labor and Bibi Netanyahu of Likud competing for the premiership, actress Tiki Dayan, I'm assuming she is a granddaughter of, or
Tiki?
daughter or granddaughter.
And look,
Tiki is the name of my granddaughter, but the Dayan part is
what's her, how does that spelled in English?
Tiki, and then Dayan. I think she's Moshe Dayan's,
Granddaughter?
maybe. Because obviously Moshe Dayan was
Tiki Diane, Israeli actress.
is she related to Moshe Dayan? I think they would say it at some point that she was.
Unless she wasn't publicized.
Born in
Well, I know.
1948.
She's born in 48, so that could make her his daughter. That would make her his daughter if she was his daughter.
Let's see. Oh, wait a second.
So actress Tiki Dayan called the Likud supporters of Netanyahu Asaf Suf from the markets. So she called the supporters of Netanyahu Asaf Suf, meaning, and Netanyahu said, I'm a proud member of the Asaf Suf.
Israel Theater Prize.
Likud even handed out stickers saying, Ani Asaf Suf Ga'eh. I'm a proud member of the Asaf Suf. Thus, whatever their original meaning, the biblical terms Asaf Suf and Erev Rav live on in Jewish
Tiki
parlance.
comes from Tikva.
Not, that's my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter. My granddaughter's name is Tikva Ne'ima.
What a great name.
I agree. But she's called Tiki.
That's adorable.
It is, and she is adorable. Asaf Suf and Erev Rav live on in Jewish parlance, not as a positive description of outsiders who throw in their lot with Israel, but as a slur against fellow Jews. Rabbi David Zucker is an independent scholar. He holds a PhD from the University of Birmingham, an ordination, and MAHL from Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. He publishes regularly in a place called Read More. His latest book is American Rabbis, Facts and Fiction. Okay, anyways, I thought that was interesting. We got a little bit of the scholarly thinking about Erev Rav. He did mention sources from the Medrash and Ibn Ezra. The one quote that he had from Rashi, that seems to be the one that's most often the understanding, which is that these are converts. And this has led to something which, for some reason, Rabbi David Zucker did not bring up. But it is an issue that has impacted the attitude towards converts and conversion within the Orthodox community. At different times, there's been like a hardening of a stance of who qualifies as a convert and what the standards should be for conversion. And the excuse for the hard stance is because once you let people in, now they're in. And now you have potential enemies from within. So therefore, you have to be much more careful about who you let in. And I'm surprised they didn't bring it up because it really, I think, is a huge part of what influences the swing back and forth between how open we are to conversion. There are times when, like maybe 20 years ago, or something like 20 years ago, when Israel suddenly just said, we've had enough with American conversions. Okay? And if you're gonna be a convert, you have to come from one of this group. And it was a very tiny group. I don't even know if there were 30 names on it. And the CRC was not on it.
You're kidding.
No, they had to go to Israel and negotiate in Israel to make sure they were on it. And Rabbinical Council of America was
sometimes we
not
just
on it.
shoot ourselves in the foot, don't we?
Yes, but what if you ask yourself, what is their excuse for it? They will evoke this. The Asaf Soup. You bring them in, now they're in. You're not. Now you've got your enemy within.
I mean, we all have stories about people that I have an interesting story from 40, 50 years ago, almost. 45. About, I lived on a mashab with a Moroccan family. He was Moroccan, she was French. She was not Jewish, but her mother had lied to the rabbi and said, "Oh yeah, she's Jewish." So they had a ketubah. She's speaking Hebrew. She's living in Israel, keeping a kosher home.
Right, but she never really.
But she never went through the process.
Right. So
And she's not the only one. Trust me.
Right. So, yeah, and that anytime there's a system, there's going to be.
Because it was different in France. I guess the mother, I don't know what the rabbi did. She goes racially sewed.
Right.
I said, why she told me at 18 years old, I don't know.
Right. But there were times the other way around where they were Jewish, but they told their kids they're not Jewish.
Right.
And there are people
Madeleine
like that.
Albright.
Right. There was a guy I met from like the panhandle of Florida. I think the family were farmers, or I think they were farmers. And he was like this kid who grew up in a farming kind of family in the panhandle of Florida, who was brilliant, and he ended up at Yale. And I have to tell you about the Dan Oren thing. But anyways, go back to that. So at Yale, so he ends up at Yale, and he's interested in history. So as a project, he decides to do his family history. So he ends up. He gets a grant to do this project, and he ends up going to Germany because his family was from Germany, and he starts finding the family records, and they all say they're Jewish.
Did his mother and father know they were Jewish? Or
I think so. It was only his grand. I think his mother knew. It's his mother's family. I think both their families. It might have been both their families that were Jewish.
This has happened so many times. My current hairdresser is technically Jewish. Why? Because it's all on her mother's side. It's the grandmothers from, I think her great-great-grandmother came from Germany. She finds out, she gets all this, like a Kiddush cup, there's Stars of David, all this stuff around it. She goes, "I'm the real deal." I said, "You are."
But the thing is, in his case, they purposefully didn't want people to know because they were trying to get away from what happened to them.
I used to do a program called Our Jewish Home, and we would go and get families, and we would do family education 4 times a year. You had the Tishrei holidays, Pesach, whatever. So this man who was Jewish, but he didn't find out he was Jewish until he was an adult. He's married to a non-Jew, but he wants to have this Jewish home, and they're, coming to their Judaism, asking me questions about conversion, where I have to be very, But it was so interesting. They were just afraid to show the mother. His parents didn't want to show him he was Jewish. Never had a mezuzah on the door. Had no clue, and somehow he finds out as an adult.
This guy eventually found people that were at his grandparents' wedding. They were still alive.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did this guy convert?
He didn't. I forgot if they were gonna ask him to convert, because he had a lot of evidence. Well, he came to, I met him at Orsamath in Israel, and he was there for a few weeks. And he was living, you know, as a Jew. Another guy who found that out was the guy from Freakonomics. The writer, and now he's a major podcast guy.
I know who
Levitt,
you're talking about.
not Levitt, and the other.
So let me know when you go to Israel.
Yeah. As soon as
All
I
right,
can.
be well, guys.
All right.
Rabbi, can I
Okay.
ask, can a ger marry the daughter of a Kohen?
Yes.
Okay,
Tell you the funny story of my daughter. She
thank
was-
you.
Rabbi.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye
All right, be well,
everyone.
guys.
Bye Linda.
Happy
Nice to
Hanukkah.
see you. Happy
Happy
Hanukkah,
Hanukkah.
everyone.
Happy
Happy
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
The patient goes, Leora? Well, what kind of name is Leora?